Hello and welcome to the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Kieron, the founder of Speak It Out. Kieron, it's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this. It's always good to chat, isn't it? And especially for TrueMan Podcast. Looks like you're doing some good stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat today. Thanks. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this one as well. It's a little bit of a deeper conversation for sure, but we will get into that. But as always, Kieron, in your own words, what makes you a man?
I think I grew up thinking that a man was, to suppress and hide, what was going on for them. But actually, I think a man is someone who's more prepared to be vulnerable. I think, and being more open and authentic. So I think being a man is being authentic. That's what we'll go with.
Awesome. And Kieron, why don't you tell us a little bit about Speak It Out?
Yeah. So Speak It Out is a something that a charity that I founded based on the idea of helping boys understand that they too can be victim of sexual crime, and yeah, so the idea was really to raise awareness amongst boys because boys tend to have this narrative of um, you know girls are the victims, boys are the perpetrators. That's always been the narrative, but it's not true. And the statistics show that 1 in 6 men experience sexual violence of some sort. More recent statistics show 1 in 5, and I think in order to prevent that, we need to really educate boys and make sure boys know that they can speak out about something like this if it's happened to them, because on average as well, it's like 25 years for a man to come forward and actually speak out about this kind of thing. And so if we start early and we get in there and show boys that they're affected by it too, and they have somewhere that they can come and talk, whether that be the parents, the teachers, other services that are available, and that's what Speak It Out it's about. It's about educating really more than anything else.
Do you think that there is a serious gap between boys, women, girls, and sort of the preconception of what is classed as sexual violence as well?
Yeah, absolutely. um when I've done these workshops and things in schools, like the lads will always, and not even just the lads, like the teachers as well, like they'll be shocked when you talk about a man being raped. It's like, how does a man be raped? How can a man possibly be raped? There's no like concepts there. And yeah, and so when it comes to girls, there's of course girls are a part of this space, and I think more so it's dominated by the female victim, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't mean that the space isn't or shouldn't be shared with men, because no matter who you are, if you've been victim of sexual violence in some way, we're in that same category together. And some people are fond of sharing that space, others aren't, because I think a lot of people still see it as a girl's space, see it as something that girls are more entitled to, um, and so yeah, I think the disparity there between what people perceive of boys and girls as a difference. Yeah, we need to see them both as what they are, and that's equal as a victim. Um, but when you look at schooling and education, you see that girls do get more of a voice there, more of a platform for talking about this kind of thing, and like schools will get in different organisations, and they'll always have something for girls. They'll always have something like, for example, rape crisis. They'll come in and speak to the girls, but the boys are often forgotten, and they'll have like something else going on, whilst the girls are in with the organization that they've been brought in for. So yeah, there's definitely a difference, a very different approach to boys than we see for girls. But we need to change that, definitely. We need to level that playing field in a way.
There's definitely been a movement around sort of domestic violence where it seems a little bit more okay, might not be the right word, but it seems a little bit more acceptable that a man can sort of suffer from domestic violence. I remember being in that space working for a charity a number of years ago now, and it was like 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. So it was still pretty close then. It wasn't sort of that, but I think more men have felt more comfortable coming out of it. As you sort of alluded to at the beginning, being a man is being authentic, in your words. So that ability to sort of get rid of that traditional mask and be like, actually, what's going on here is not right. You talked about that huge time average for men and boys to sort of come out around that. Do you expect these numbers to rise as more men feel confident coming out around sort of sexual violences?
I mean, I would like to think so. I'd like to think that more men will feel more comfortable coming forward. But I do strongly believe that where the impact is really going to be seen is in preventative measures rather than reactive measures. And a lot of the time it is all about reactive measures. It's all about this has happened, so then what can we do to rectify that, rather than thinking, this is happening. How do we make sure we don't get to this crisis point? Where it's all over the news, and where there's big stories coming out. The most prolific serial rapist was Sinaga in Manchester, and he was a guy, and he raped men, and that's the biggest rape case ever seen in the UK. And that had its moment, and it had its like time in the spotlight, so to speak. But we can't forget that, and we can't forget that this is still ongoing. It's still an ongoing issue. But I think when it comes to disclosure and men coming forward, I hope, and I do think, as we look at statistics of, in comparison to maybe years ago and things, we do see more men coming forward. But I think that's because men these days are feeling more empowered to come forward and maybe to speak more openly. Thanks to organisations such as Andy's Man Club, for example, getting that ball rolling massively for men. Without organisations that encourage men to speak out about anything that's troubling them, there's no conversation happening for men to get involved with. So I think the organisations that are facilitating conversation and starting conversation, that's only going to empower men more to speak. Because if there's no conversation for men to join, then the silence is going to be continuing to consume them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the sort of increase in these spaces and these sort of increases in people sharing as well, right? I think there's something that's really powerful. Lived experience is something that people can sort of tangibly grab something from, whether it's just a small slither and go, actually, okay, maybe I can speak as well, and sort of go through that. Sort of on that, Kieron, it would be good to get an understanding of how you essentially found yourself in this space.
Yeah. So I was sexually abused from being 6 years old up until I was about 16 years old. But honestly, that wasn't something that crossed my mind as being abuse, because as a kid, obviously, from especially being so young, being 6 years old, you don't you don't know any different, do you? Anyway, so it's not something that you would question in that sense. But also, it was somebody who had my trust and love, I guess, in that sense. And so it was never something that I considered really. I always knew it was a secret. They always said that it was a secret. I couldn't tell anybody. That I'll get in trouble if I did. And then and then um, when I was about 14, um, I would say about 14, yeah. I kind of had this kind of change in how I was feeling, and as you do, I guess, as a 14-year-old boy, like there's a lot going on, a lot changing, and your conversations with your mates and stuff is changing, and and it was around that time that I kind of began to think, oh, I think there's something not right, like here with this, um, and so that's when I remember. Um, Having a bit of a shift in my mind, really. And then as I got older, I didn't tell anybody. I still didn't tell anybody for a very long time. And then I I had a like mental health chat with a mental health nurse. Um, Something of a breakdown, I guess, and she told me, she gave me this leaflet for Survivors UK, and which is a service for men who've experienced sexual abuse. And I took it, and I didn't even think about like contacting them. I didn't. I thought it was just ridiculous. Thought it was silly to, to even go there. And then it was when I was doing my teacher training. That I thought, if I'm going to go into teacher training, I need to probably get myself prepared for the potential of it being quite triggersome.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and somebody had told me once that the best time to get support is when you're at your best. And I don't know who told me, but they did, and I remembered it. And so then I reached out to Survivors UK, and I blurted out um, over the phone about I need support because of this, that, the other. And then this guy just said, "Where are you located?" Sorry, probably thinking your accent doesn't sound like London, and or the south. And I said, "Oh, I'm in Wigan," and he said, "Oh no, this is a service for London. You might have meant to have contacted Survivors Manchester, which was another charity, not the same charity, but they worked in Greater Manchester, and so anyway, I ended up reaching out to them. They're now called We Are Survivors, but it's a charity that basically it's all about therapy. So the charity fundamentally is to help men deal with what's happened and have talking therapy there to facilitate healing. But I'd gone to get help from them, and I went for like this initial chat. And I remember I walked up, the door was like the old office that they had. The door was like just on a main road, and it didn't have a big sign saying like Survivors Manchester or you know men who've been sexually abused come here or anything like that. But still, it was this door, and I kind of thought I felt really vulnerable and really on show because it was on this main road, and I remember just hitting the buzzer and waiting for somebody to answer and come to the door, get me off the street, and in case anybody saw me. Um, and and then I had this initial meeting, and I don't want a male therapist. I've just always gravitated to women to be vulnerable with. So I've never wanted, in my mind, I'd never wanted a man to have therapy with. Um, and they said, "Oh well, the only person we've got is a man, and the female therapists you'll be waiting a while to see." And I said, "Oh well, I'll just go with it." I thought I'll try it and just see. Um, and so I did, and I went in with my walls up definitely to start with. But then actually it was the best thing that I think I've ever decided to do.
Yeah.
And and it really, there were times when I would just go in and literally spend the best part of 30 minutes just crying. Um, and he was very patient and kind with me. And also, the great thing about it was that the guy that I was having the talk therapy with, he was also somebody who'd experienced very similar things to me. So there was that relatability straight away, and that level of understanding that I'd never had before.
Yeah.
Um, so it was brilliant, really. And as I say, there was times when I'd go in and I'd just cry, or there's times when I'd go in and I'd just sit there, like looking out of this window, staring into space, really. And but that was all part of the healing process for me. He didn't prod me, didn't force me to talk, and I just talked when I was ready, and eventually got it all out, got it all off my chest, and it was incredible, and I wanted to give back really to the charity, and so I volunteered for like 3 years, and then eventually ended up working for them as well, actually for a couple of years, something like coming up to 2 years probably,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, and so basically that's what kind of led me here, because I when I said before I was training to be a teacher, and when I went into the job, um, I kind of didn't really think twice about the whole like boys and raising awareness, things like that. Like, it didn't really cross my mind, because I just, once I'd had the therapy and I realised I weren't on my own, and I realised that other men are dealing with the same thing. Other men have been in that position. I kind of thought, well, surely, if there's this charity set up specifically for men, and there's one in London as well, and maybe the government have come to the realization that this is an issue, and maybe in my own mind I thought schools must be doing more for boys these days than they were when I was there. But sadly, it wasn't the case, and boys still weren't part of the conversation. So that's what kind of led me to want to do more initially. Um, and then, yeah, and I'm going into my 8th year of teaching now, and I'm doing Speak It Out as a charity now as well, and I want to really change the landscape for boys in education when it comes to sexual abuse. They shouldn't be seen as perpetrators, and seen, or potential perpetrators, and seen as less of a victim than females, because they're not. They're experiencing the same experience as a girl would be experiencing, in terms of sexual abuse being sexual abuse, and it doesn't target, people don't just target a girl. um, we're all susceptible in that sense, in terms of gender. So yeah, so that's where I'm at now, and I think the best thing I ever did was to get the therapy, and after that I just felt really empowered to speak out more, and to be confident in my own story, and my own experiences, because as we were talking about before, like, it's when there's a conversation happening that you can join that conversation, and if there's no conversation happening, then you're even more suppressed in that sense. So if I can be one of the people standing up and saying that happened to me, and encourage others to join in, then brilliant. I'm happy to do that.
Looking back and sort of all the work that you've done now, you ended up with a male therapist in the end. How important do you think gendered spaces are, specifically in your space, but also in general as well?
Yeah, I mean, people are very sensitive to that kind of topic, aren't they? And I mean, I had I have a friend who tried to set up something that was a shared space for men and women as male and female survivors um, of childhood sexual abuse, and unfortunately, it didn't work out. And the reality is that we do need separate spaces. That might sound contradictory to what I was just saying about us being the same and leveling the playing field and all of that, what I was just talking about, but it, that's still valid.
Yeah.
There's still value in what I've just said, but I think when it comes to a shared space, it takes away from the ability to be truly vulnerable. I think if, let's say, we had a men's health group. Let's say we had a mental health group set up, and all these men came and they wanted to talk about things that affect them, and of course that's relatable because everybody else is a man. And then suddenly they say, "Oh, well, actually, we're going to open it up to women as well, join in," and then 5 women come to that session, and join the men there. It's not only um, getting in the way of the healing of the men; it's getting in the way of the healing of the women, because they're coming into a space that is designed for men. First of all, they're coming into a space where men want to talk about what's affecting them, um, and women have different experiences in that sense. As I was saying before, when it comes to sexual abuse is sexual abuse. It doesn't matter in that sense. But as a man, as a woman, our experiences differ. Our experiences are different, and the things that we want to talk about often are different in that sense, aren't they? So, we're affected similarly, but we're not affected in such a similar way that would allow for seamless conversation between us in a group. And yeah, I mean, when I said about I wanted a female therapist, I did, and I was gutted about that. But that was my own personal thing. I mean, there are many men who have been abused by a woman, and they may not have wanted a woman. And so, I can have that preference, but it doesn't mean that I would then go to a female group, or and get support through that. It doesn't make any sense. And um yeah, so I think it is very important that there is a difference. It doesn't work. I mean, history, will show that it doesn't work to join together in that sense. I think in terms of advocacy, in terms of not advocacy, but in terms of fighting
Yeah.
cause, absolutely we should stand side by side in that. But I do think when it comes to help and the best kind of support, I think it has to be separate, really. I say it has to be, you know. I think it's better.
Yeah, I mean, we're all entitled to our opinions, right?
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate in you can support and help and drive things forward in any space that you want to do in any way that you feel that that's going to be effective. But when it comes to treatment and your sort of journey, it needs to be personally as niche as possible and as bespoke as possible, which is probably where the UK health system sort of fails and where charities have to pick up quite a big burden of that, because the NHS is here's some pills, go away. And
Yeah.
everyone sort of has their own view on things and their own sort of ideas of what will help them and what will work with them. And I sort of on that as well, some people would want like a clinical person who's gone through everything, got all the degrees, read all the books, and done everything, and knows how to basically fix them. Whereas some people, like you say, want that lived experience, want someone who's on the same page, where they feel that they can be more vulnerable. Do you think that is really important. Do we need more people with lived experience to enter these spaces?
Yeah, I mean, more and more, I think people are looking for people with lived experience because, you can read all the books you want. If you haven't been there, I mean, are you truly of use to the people in need? I would say no. So you can bring a bit of knowledge to the table. You can, you know as we were saying before, you can stand as an ally, absolutely. But when it comes to the real um, depth of the conversation, it happens between people with lived experience. It's not, and shared lived experience rather. Um, and I was just thinking then as well, like as part of my role at We're Survivors, um, when I worked there, we ran, and they still do. They run a safe room, so um, men come together and they just chat about basically what they're going through and how they're coping with everything. And the conversations that happened in those groups, like I led one of the groups, so once a week we'd come together and we'd have a real good chat, incredibly therapeutic. But you know, I was leading it, but I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm not, and that's within the what's the word? The motivation of a safe room isn't to sit for an hour and chat with a psychotherapist. That's therapy, and that's one-to-one therapy that you would get anyway through the service. But it was more to do with peer support, and it was more to do with um, you know chatting with each other and being able to safely and confidently talk about things that you wouldn't be able to just talk to anybody else about. And it's that lived experience element that is important. There is pivotal, really, to any sort of healing that you're going to experience in those settings. And I suppose that goes back as well to what we were just talking about gender, with gender, because the things that we were talking about in the safe rooms, like I'm pretty sure, well, a woman being a part of that group wouldn't have learned anything in terms of they wouldn't have gained anything from those conversations. Like, they were very much male orientated. I mean, for example, one conversation was about how it just came out of nowhere, really. But we were talking about, like, using public toilets and using the urinal. And everybody in the group, like, it was funny because I'd always felt like I didn't want to use the urinal. I'd always go to cubicle if possible. But um, I'd never talked about it to anybody. I just thought it was a personal preference, and that was it. But then it turned out that everybody in this group literally felt the same way about that, and I thought there must be something in that, and that's that conversation itself. It's just of no use to um, anybody else, you know. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean they're great, aren't they, for those sort of things where you maybe start to unearth something that you can then take into therapy, right? Where you go, we spoke like this in a group session. Everyone seems to do this. I just thought it was normal. I would potentially like to explore that a little bit more. Or you might just leave that room and be like, still going to use the cubicle, but it was nice. I'm not on
yeah,
it,
yeah.
kind of thing.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what's incredibly important about all of this. It's acknowledging that you're not on your own, and that's why I think the 25-year average for men is so large as a gap, like, between it happening and speaking out about it, because they don't realize that they have others who have been through the same thing. I thought I was the only one in the world. Genuinely did. I genuinely thought I was the only guy in the world who had experienced what I'd experienced, and I'm not. But I thought I was. You know.
Well, obviously, as you said, things like Andy's Man Club and the idea of vulnerability and the sort of change. I think a lot of men, maybe 25, 30, 40 years ago, thought they were only blokes that got sad when they had a bad day at work, and sort of were the only ones that could. The only solution was to drink 5 pints and then go home.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
it's all changing, which is great to see. You mentioned that you talk about a proactive approach to this, so sort of stopping it earlier or seeing signs. So what is that? What is the kind of things that you're teaching? What are the things that you're sort of looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's less about when it comes to the boys, the boys receive like awareness education. So it's literally it's not like too much of a weight on them. It is literally it's just about having a chat with them, ensuring that they understand that being a boy doesn't mean that they have to present themselves in this like ultra masculine I'm strong and nothing affects me. That's the foundation of it. It's that to be a man doesn't mean that you man up. It doesn't mean that you grow some balls. It's not about that. And so that's the basis of it to begin with. But then it's about, well, what do we understand about the word rape? You know, what does that mean? And it's interesting because it's always the case where the lads will be like, well, a man has sex with a woman who didn't consent to it. That kind of response. Um, which is great because then it it adds value to what I'm trying to do with them is to educate them on that, and so it's a great starting point. But yeah, and that's what it is really. It's about educating them. It's about raising awareness so that they know that if they are that one person out of six in that room who is going through that, then it's okay because you're not on your own. And actually, this is something that happens to boys because the target audience really, well, at the minute, is 14 year old boys. So like aiming at like year 9 boys typically.
Yeah,
And that's based purely really on my experience of coming to that age where you are thinking more about your identity, and who you are, and what's next for you, I guess, into in that terms of stages of development. But yeah, and that's what's basically based on, and the motivation. But then not just that, but we do training for teachers, so that is more to do with not only raising awareness, but you know um, the signs, helping take down or remove barriers that there may be in school, to stop boys from coming forward, and also chatting with parents as well. So parents receive like a similar workshop as their sons did um, earlier in the day. So it's it's basically about bridging the gaps and ensuring that we're facilitating conversations and not just having it in an isolated space. Really, throughout school, you'll see every year group will come face to face with some organisation that have come in to deliver an assembly,
yeah,
um, and that's like a I don't know 20 minutes, and then that's it. And see you later. They might talk about it at some point during that day with each other, maybe if it's been that hard hitting. Rarely is it, but that's it. And they can't go home and have a conversation about what they've heard or seen because they they're aware that the people at home weren't in school. They didn't experience it. They didn't know what was going on in that regard. But also, you know, I'm not naive to think that boys are going home and sitting at the dinner table and having a chat with the parents about what they've done at school today. I know that it's not, the norm, but I do think for parents, it's kind of, they have this understanding now that they may have never had before, and they can use that. They can say to the, I don't know, Joe, who's come home that afternoon, or that evening, whatever. Oh, did you hear Kieron speak it out about boys? It's just facilitating conversation. It's just opening people up to allow conversation to happen. Because the thing is, any kind of abuse, typically it happens in secret, and it's basically to kind of stop that from remaining in the dark, and kind of, I don't know, I don't mean scare people, but like when it comes to parents, like we know that, parents do abuse the children, but it's kind of, if that conversation is happening, it kind of lets perpetrators know, not necessarily parents, but people who may come into the home regularly or whatever. It's letting them know as well, that, and teachers as well, because the harsh reality is that a lot of sexual abuse happens in the education system. That's like at the top of the leaderboard in that regard. And so it's just letting them know as well that we're talking about this now. We're not hiding away. We're not, allowing it to happen in secret and boys not talk about it because they think it's normal. And they think it's only something that affects girls. We're talking about it. So what are you going to do? Like, are you going to stop what you're doing? Maybe. But it's making it harder for them to continue. I do believe that, by talking.
So you'll see every now and then, mainly out of the States, I think, is where it sort of comes out, is a female teacher that has sort of slept with someone in the football team. You sort of get the idea of the level of high school that we're talking about. And the comments in that will be, why did he tell? Who did he tell? Why would he, sounds like a dream to sleep with your teacher, and all of these things. What's your thoughts on those sort of comments?
Well, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? I think when it comes to as I was talking about before with the narrative idea, the narrative is so different when it's a female abuser. And the kind of, it just reinforces that idea that men can't be perceived as a victim. Like, a victim? No, they're not a victim. They've had it good. Like, who wouldn't want to sleep with the hot teacher or whatever? And it's reinforcing that, which is just, that is toxic, isn't it? And yeah, but you're right with like the press and things. Like, it's always such a downplay. Like, it's not. If a male teacher had slept with a female student, it's like teacher rapes underage girl, or whatever. But when it's the other way around, like you were saying, it's like female teacher sleeps with student. Well, it's the same thing that's happening. There's still been that level of grooming. There's still been that level of, incredibly inappropriate interaction. And ultimately, you can't even give consent until you're of the age of consent. That's literally what it's called, the age of consent. So you can't consent to something until that point anyway, legally. So it's just ridiculous. I think the point of talking is here for me personally. I think, once we start talking about it, it is difficult to stop, because you do see the real value in it. You see that actually, this one person might hear this conversation, it might change their understanding of what it's like for a man as well. And you never know. You never know what things can lead to. But I do think the more we talk, then the more likelihood there is of more systemic change as well, and more of a mainstream change. Because let's be honest, the conversation that we're having today, and the conversations that I've had on other podcasts, or the like, and I think we are aware of it because we're either living it in that space, or we've come across it, through an algorithm that has somehow led us to that particular podcast. And so it's not mainstream. It's not something that is here, there, and everywhere. It isn't part of the same narrative of like say, a man raping a woman. Um, I don't believe that we're there yet. But I do think that this kind of thing can only really change if we are having conversations like this with young lads, with teachers, with parents, because otherwise we're just counting on them coming across it, stumbling across it, Googling it, which they're not going to do about something that they don't even think happens in the first place.
With the parents and on that side of things, do you have many dads attending? And if so, what's their sort of take on
Yeah.
it?
Do you know what? Yeah. Do you know what? I think it's interesting because there was one guy that I remember really clearly and fondly. Is he came up to me after the fact, and just shook my hand and just gave me like a real, like, I don't know, like a stir of like respect or something. Do you know what I mean? And I remember that, and I still think about it because it speaks volumes without him even saying anything, because it shows exactly what men are typically like, in terms of that silence and that not wanting to be vulnerable. Like, I'm sure there's many things he would have wanted to say to me if he wasn't with his wife. I don't know. But just that handshake, taking the time to come and find me, to give me a handshake, and to look at me in the way that he did, it really meant something to him. I couldn't tell you what exactly because, as I say, he didn't speak. But that's just one instance, and I think men are receptive. Absolutely. I don't think I've ever. I can't think of a time when a man has been like, "Oh, shut up, get on with it," or anything like that. I think once the conversation has been opened, there's a level of respect there that it isn't a case of arguing whether it's true or not, or whether it's right or wrong, things like that. I think it's just straight away, this is horrible, this is a thing that's happened, it's really bad. And you can't argue as well when it comes to statistics and you share those. It's like, well, oh god, right, okay, well, this is actually happening. I don't think people, who are intelligent enough, I don't think people can turn around and be like, shut up, it's not an issue, or get over it, man up, whatever. I mean, there's the ignorance of people, absolutely. But the way you get around ignorance is education, and that's what we're doing. So that's fine. And I really like the adverts for Google, actually. Don't know if you've seen them, but they where they like ask like controversial questions. Like, I think there was one where someone was wearing like a do rag or something, and they say, "Oh, why do people wear do rags?" Something like that. I can't remember exactly. But what I liked about it and what stuck with me was they asked the question, and that's what defied the ignorance. And I've had friends who have tried speaking to. Like, I remember me and a friend, we went to. We'd met up in Manchester after a while, not seeing each other, and was catching up. went for Nando's and we sat there, and he just asked me how I was, and I started telling him, and he knew about this, but he said something like, "Oh, but that was years ago," like, and
Yeah.
as if like, come on, get over it, like, and that conversation was good because like I say, it counteracted that ignorance that he had, and he, up to that point, he genuinely did just think, oh, but it happened ages ago, so why are you still,
Yeah.
entertaining it, kind of thing. But that's not what it's about, and it was that conversation that we had that would have changed his perception on that.
One question I really want to ask you is: we've seen things that came out a few years ago now, like hashtag Me Too, which really shed a light on women's sexual violence and
Mm.
really helped them sort of more people open up and more people come forward around some of the sexual assaults that they'd encountered. But one of the sort of subcategories of that was this sort of harnessing all men into this sort of category of that they're essentially all capable of doing this, and that then led to the sort of lead on not all men, which then sort of created more backlash on that side of things. What do you think is needed to create a separation from the small minority that commit the majority of sexual assaults that are men and the majority of men?
Very, very good question. I think linking back in with what I was saying before, really, like about how sexual abuse or sexual assault, violence, whatever, it is within itself what it is. If we think about it the way that you just said, everybody is capable of anything. So everybody is capable of sexual assault, whether that being perpetrator or victim. Everybody is, it's possible for everybody and anybody to do that. Um, Thank God, the majority of us don't choose to do that. We don't make that conscious decision to do that kind of thing. Obviously, thank God for that. But the point is, we're all, susceptible to that in that sense. So likewise, I guess, likewise, it doesn't matter if you're male or female in that sense. The victim can be either or. And I do obviously appreciate that females take up the largest part of this space that we're in, but it's always a shared space because there's not only one gender, that's dealing with this, and so yeah, I think moving forward, and how we see a change in that, and how we become more receptive to this taboo idea that men are victim to this crime as well. I do strongly believe that preventative education is the way forward because if we're not starting these conversations early, we're only going to see the same thing happening over and over again, where we see 25 years of silence come to blows and cause severe mental injury to the men who've experienced that. So yeah, starting conversations early, involving everybody in that conversation, and trying to change the trajectory of all of this in some kind of way.
Amazing. Kieron, in the men and boys space, what do you like right now and what do you want to see more of?
I love that we are talking more. I love that. As I was talking about Andy's Man Club before, there's not only that, of course, there's so many organisations out there that are working to benefit men who often are living with, horrendous experiences and disabling feelings. So I love that. I love that we're talking more. What I want to see more of is more, I guess, acceptance of men being in that in that space, whether it be mental health discussions or whether it be the sexual violence, conversations. I think just accepting men as a human being, just like, women. And it's not about men, oh, men don't talk, men shut down, men are quiet, women talk, women, like to get together and chat about the feelings. Well, actually, believe it or not, men are feeling things too. And, they need that outlet. And so coming together and seeing more of that, I think moving forward, just more of an acceptance and more of a norm for that, rather than the need for, as great as these organisations are, as great as Andy's Man Club is, and all of that. Hopefully, in the future, we won't even need it, because it'll just be the norm.
Kieron, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a really interesting topic to speak about. For me personally, it's something new for me to learn about, which is great. So thank you for starting to remove a little bit of a taboo around this subject. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I will leave the final thoughts with yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lewis. Thank you so much for having me on, because it's been a wonderful time chatting with you. You never know really when you start these conversations off, do you, where it's going to go? But I'm really pleased with what we've discussed, and I think just for anybody who is listening or watching, if you are somebody that's had similar experiences to me, there are services out there that you can get support from. Support is it's inevitable if you want to heal, really. To talk about it, it needs to happen. So look out for those services. You're not alone. I thought I was for an incredibly long time, but I wasn't, and neither are you. So thanks a lot, Lewis, and great chatting.